Ever just looked through your optic and just thought, what does it all mean? I mean, where am I supposed to actually aim with this thing? I mean, am I supposed to aim at the bottom of the circle like you're supposed to if you're at 7 yards? Or how about you look through your magnified optic and all of a sudden you see this Christmas tree with all these lines and dots, and as you increase magnification, you're like, what in the world? All of a sudden now I can actually tell how fast somebody might be walking. What are all these reticles? How do you read them? Let's find out. Welcome back, everybody. Clint here today with Classic Firearms, here to talk about the thing that you think you might know about, but you probably don't, and that's your reticle. If you've got an optic on your gun, doesn't matter if it's a red dot, a holographic, a magnified optic of some sort, first focal plane, second focal plane, non-adjustable, you're going to have a reticle. If you don't, your batteries are either dead or your optic's broke, and, well, hopefully you have iron sights. You should. Learn how to use those. But in the meantime, let's talk about reticles. The reason I say some of you might not actually know what you're looking at is because for the longest time, I didn't. I saw a dot with a circle around it and thought, cool, aim with that dot. Nothing else matters, right? Kind of like when I look at the EOTech EXPS2 TAC2 that you see right here. What does the dash or TAC2 mean with this model? And it's quite simple. The reticle actually has two dots. You have your 68 MOA outer red dot, or excuse me, outer circle, the donut of death, if you will. And then you have a dot in the middle of the reticle, and then one just below that. And then actually below that too, you have the bottom of the reticle itself with a little vertical crosshair, two horizontal crosshairs, vertical crosshair at top. What does all that mean though? So first of all, the 68 MOA outer circle. That right there is just a very obvious reference point for super close quarters to get that up and get around on target. You can use that for shotguns, whatever you want it to be used for. It's just a great reference point, something big, something obvious in those high stress situations where you might be getting tunnel vision and you need to get shots on target quickly. Awesome. When you present your gun, that thing's going to be up there and you're like, yep, that's where I need to pull the trigger. But let's say you need to take something a little bit more precise. That middle reticle, that middle dot on the EOTech EXPS2 TAC2, same can be said for the 2 TAC-0, which doesn't have the secondary dot below the primary dot. That right there is for your shots at 50 and 200 yards with a 5.56 gun. The dot below that, well, now you're looking at 500 yards. And here's something that's really funny, and a few of you should be able to answer this question. If I'm aiming here at 50 and 200 yards, aiming here for my 500 yard shot, why is it at the bottom of my 68 MOA circle I'm aiming here for my 7 yard shot? 7 yards is what you're supposed to be shooting at or aiming with for that bottom part of the circle. Some of you might think, well, that doesn't make sense because you're aiming the gun up higher, right? Well, at a really close range, you got to take into consideration this thing called offset, or your height over bore. Because if you look at the SCAR 16, which has the EXPS3, all same optic, except this one has night vision capability. So this guy, look at how much it's actually sitting above the barrel. The closer you get on your target, so if I bring this gun, let's just say right here is my target. The closer I get, the further that deviation is going to be. And that's ultimately, again, because height over bore. So where I'm aiming at my target, if I pull the trigger, that's not where I'm going to actually be. My point of impact and my point of aim are going to be two very different things, right? So it makes sense why on that type of reticle, I would want to aim a tad bit higher, just a little bit higher, just to make sure that my point of impact and my point of aim at that point are going to be as close as possible in those close quarter scenarios. Offset, it's a big deal, because when you're not paying attention to it is when you're going to absolutely need it. And that was up there some sort of way that I forgot now. That looks good. Anyway, so 68 MOA, 1 MOA, 1 MOA, 7 yards, 500 yards, 50 and 200 yards. Easy enough, right? And that's just on a holographic. A basic red dot, like on the Aimpoint T2 that we have on this very awesome 300 blackout Sagem CX Virtus, that right there is just a simple 2 MOA red dot. Where's your hold? That's really all it comes down to. There's no windage, there's no elevation, there's no other types of reference points for this type of reticle. It's just a simple dot where you're aiming for, and for whatever yardage you have it set for is, or what you have it zeroed for, is where you're going to hit. So if you have this zeroed at 25 yards, great. Anything closer than that, offset, aim a little bit higher. Anything further than that, now you're going to have to understand trajectory, especially for 300 blackout, 5.56. You're going to have to understand your cartridge, because what you're aiming at 25 yards isn't going to have the same point of impact at 30 yards even, or 50 or 200 yards. So you're going to have to know your gun, know your ballistics, and know your optic. All right. So let's get into magnified optics. Let's start off with something very simple. This is the EOTech Voodoo. This is a second focal plane optic with a 1:8 magnification. All right. Nothing really all that fancy. It's going to do exactly what you want to do. It's illuminated, and just with a simple dot. Just go ahead and turn that on. So simple dot in the middle, and then you'll notice you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 little hash marks, vertical hash marks beneath the center dot and on the vertical stadia. All that is, again, for all these are going to be pretty much for 5.56 guns, except for, this guy's going to be for something a little bit bigger. But look at it this way. You're going to have a 100-yard hold, or a 100-yard zero, I should say, for where the crosshairs intersect, that center dot that actually illuminates on the EOTech Voodoo. From there, you're going to have a 200-yard vertical hold, or vertical reference point, then 3, then 4, and then 500 yards. Of course, that makes sense. And just keep in mind, however, if you're shooting something like this up close, you want to aim, well, just a tad bit higher for that offset. Within 25 yards, you got to really start taking that into consideration. If you're zeroed for 100 yards, take that into consideration. All right? Cool. Those ones are easy because what you see is what you get. Oh, and the the horizontal stadia that you see there on top of the vertical stadia, well, those are typically to measure the shoulder width of a man-sized target. Makes sense. Typically. On this one here, doesn't look like those are really changing that much size or anything, but that's typically how you look at it. You want to know, so that way you can kind of get a little bit of a range estimation. All right, I might not know how far away my target is, but my target is fitting within this reticle shoulder width. It's going to be as close as I can get without a rangefinder. Maybe I can understand about the size of a door and how far away that is. You got to be able to understand these different types of reference points and be able to judge distance to the naked eye. Like, for instance, how do we judge 100 yards? Well, we can imagine about how big or how long a football field is. So take that. For instance, recently we're out at a range. I got told, hey, how far away do you think that target is? Well, somebody said 150 yards. I said 700 yards, and it was 685 yards away. I felt good about my answer. Still would have missed, but I felt good that I was that close, all right? So just, be able to do that. I'm not like fantastic at it or anything, and it's something I'm personally trying to work on, so that way I can do a little bit more range estimation without having to use technology, and hopefully get a shot on target at greater distances without having to use too much technology, except for the reticle that I have been given. All right. So being able to use your reticle to identify range is a must. From there, we have something, we'll get a little bit more complicated here in a second, but let's go to a non-magnified, a non-adjustable but still magnified optic. Like a second focal plane magnification or a second focal plane optic, the reticle itself isn't changing in size or anything like that. A first focal plane, like what we'll be talking about here in just a moment, not only are you bringing the target closer to you and magnifying it, but you're also zooming in or bringing the reticle closer to you, unveiling more information. And we'll be talking about that with the first focal plane optic here in just a moment. Then you have a set, stationary, non-adjustable magnified optic like the ACOG. Everybody loves the ACOG, right? I mean, I know I do. So with this one, it's what you see is what you get, literally. Because as you look through it, on this model here in particular, you've got the horseshoe model. The horseshoe model, unlike the chevron model that I was originally issued, has this kind of umbrella around it with a center dot followed by a 4 mark. There's a unmarked 5, a 6 mark, an unmarked 7, an 8 mark, an unmarked 9, a Mark 10, an unmarked 11, and unmarked 12 mark. We can all assume what those mean. By the way, this optic here is set up for actual 7.62 NATO or 308, not 5.56. So with that in mind, that's why this one goes out to those greater distances like that. And you'll notice on these ones, what I like about the ACOG is the stadia, the horizontal stadia, as it drops with the bullet compensation, actually starts to shrink a little bit too. Again, the ACOG is a great combat optic because, well, your target's typically man. With that being said, without a rangefinder, you want to be able to identify about how far away this man is. Well, then you can take a look at the 500-yard mark on this. You can take that, set it on your target, and if he fits within that, seems like that's right, your target's estimated to be about 500 yards away. Of course, give or take that, and then be able to make that solid shot if need be. I like that quite a bit. Makes sense. It's a rugged optic, one of the best I think there's ever been. Now, there's also similar optic. It's the ACOG. This is for the 5.56. Very similar setup to what I'm actually issued, including the reticle. The reticle on this guy has the chevron reticle, which is a little bit different. Is it something I prefer? I like the horseshoe reticle for closer engagements because it's easier to pick up naturally. But utilizing what's called the BAC, or the bend and aiming concept, keep both eyes open. Even though it's a magnified optic, you will be able to clear a room with an ACOG with no problem. All it takes is a little bit of training and practice. But being able to keep both eyes open, aim down at your target, I can easily shoot the doorknob of that door out of the way or whatever else I need to do, and I could quickly acquire that target without having to get kind of like sucked into that tunnel vision of being in a magnified optic. So if I'm aiming down on a target and all I see is the button of his shirt, okay, well, open up your non-dominant eye. Now all of a sudden your brain is communicating with both eyes. You're seeing a reticle here, target here, overlay that, shoot, destroy the threat, right? Again, takes practice, but I have faith you guys can do it. Now what's cool about the chevron is the tip of the chevron is your 100-yard zero. The crotch of the chevron's 200 yards. That vertical post that's just underneath the chevron, 300 yards. And then from there, they've got it marked for 400, 500, whatever it might be, depending on the different types of reticles that are offered. And you've also got windage, not just elevation on this one. You've got windage marks on both of these off to the left and right. Those are to gauge different types of movement. And we can actually talk a little bit more about that. Let's get into the Horus reticle, or what like some people refer to as the Trimmer 3 reticle on something like this Leupold. First of all, this is a first focal plane optic. This is a 7 to 35 optic. You can zoom in on a lot. This is a very, very powerful optic. This is the Mark 5 HD by Leupold. Excellent optic, super clear glass, and to be quite frank with you, it's probably too much optic for most of what we do on the channel and for most people out there. But there are some people with some special wants or specific needs that are going to want something like this 7 to 35 Mark 5 HD. So something I like about this guy is there is a lot of information. Something I don't like about this is there is a lot of information. It can be pros and cons, right? It can be a good thing for you because it's giving you so much information that you could be looking at several different targets downrange and be able to identify, yep, I think that one's walking about 7 miles per hour. Looks like if I give him this type of a lead, looks like he might be that far away. Let's aim a little bit higher up. Now I've actually got a reticle for that. I'm not aiming off into space. And you see that as you increase magnification on this optic, it brings and unveils even more and more information. So there's so much to look at. If you know what you're doing and you've been trained on this reticle, it becomes very easy to accurately and quickly engage and precisely engage that target. So I think I said accurately, quickly, precisely. You get what I'm saying though. Anyway, the Trimmer 3 is a fantastic reticle. It, like I said, it gives you a lot to look at, but that can be distracting if it's not what all you need. If you're just shooting targets out to 100 yards, then a 38 power, 35 power optic like this with books of information. I mean, this right here is just, excuse me, ACOG. This right here is all just information on that Horus reticle. But if you're just engaging targets out to 100 yards and you're not exactly going for absolute precision, you just want to hear that steel ring, you don't really need something like that, right? Save yourself a few $1,000s and go with something that's going to be more suitable to your needs. But the Horus Field Guide Trimmer 3 reticle overview, blah, blah, blah. You've got time of flight wind dots on this guy. You've also been able to determining wind dot value for your specific ballistics. You've got, let's see, refined milling chevrons. You're able to identify moving targets, miles per hour, 2. Lead in mills, 1.25. All that information being provided to you, again, if you know how to read the reticle right here. Like, that I think is pretty awesome. So for instance, if my target's moving at approximately 10 miles per hour, I know I need to lead him in 6.5 mils to accurately engage that target. Sweet. Thanks. I have all that information right inside this optic. So depending on your reticle is really going to depend, or actually I should say, depending on your shooting is going to really depend on the reticle that you get. Again, if you're looking for something close quarters, quick on the target, home defense, I'm really not going to need an EOTech with the reticle that it has, because maybe for the 50 and 200 yard hold with the 7-yard circle, sure, that's fine. But a simple red dot, like what I showed you guys before on the Virtus, might be a lot better for you. First of all, it's got better battery life. If it's going to be more of a home defense gun, I wouldn't worry about it being so dang rugged that I could throw it up against a still target and it still holds 0 and crush it like I have, and it still holds 0. But something that could save you a little bit more money, a simple red dot that can accurately hold on target. Great. That's all you need. If you're going to be engaging targets with your Mark 13 mod, whatever the heck, then yeah, I might want something that's first focal plane, has greater magnification, maybe has a trimmer 3 reticle that I can really get out there and accurately engage these targets. Maybe I'm just going to be shooting at a flat range 200-300 yards, so I want something that I could accurately do that with. Maybe I'm going to be running a 3-gun competition, and I'm going to need to be able to cycle from a close target to a distant target back to a close target quickly, right? There's all sorts of different, I guess, variations to different types of optics, to even different types of reticles, because all of these optics that I'm talking about are offered with different reticles to fit your need as the shooter. What are your needs? Again, home defense, probably not going to need anything too crazy. Make sure you got it. Make sure you got a light. Make sure you got an optic, iron sights, just in case you forgot to replace your batteries, right? Easy day. You're going to be going out to the woods, stalking something for a while on a hunt. You don't want something big and bulky that's going to be weighing down your rifle. You probably don't need all the information that's going to be given to you on something like this. So maybe go with something a little bit more simple, right? Your 3 to 9x40 is probably one of the most popular hunting rifles out there because you don't need much more than that at all. So take that for what you will. Let me know what works best for you and in what application. For your hunting rifle setup, what type of optic and reticle do you prefer? Your home defense setup, let me know. The end of days optic, what might that be? Maybe it's this guy with the magnifier like what I have on the Scar 16 back here. Let me know what you guys think, but I hope this was a good basic overview over what a reticle actually is and how to read it. Again, do the research on the different types of optics that you might be picking up as well. You don't want to go into a fight learning for the first time what your gun is going to do or how to read your reticle. That's something you should do way before that. So just keep that in mind, all right? Go out there, get training, seek professional training, like people with a reputation also, because there's guys all over the internet that will give you all sorts of bad information. I'm just presenting the information that I have here, right? And just because your favorite gun tuber says this is the latest, greatest, and you should have this and you should have that, doesn't necessarily mean that's true for you. So go out there and figure out what exactly does work for you. For instance, for me, I have a Leupold optic on my Mark 12 that's not even in production anymore, still being serviced by Leupold though, in case something goes wrong. That's nice. I've checked because I'm not easy on any of my guns, but I do know exactly what my holds are. I know how accurate I am with it, both suppressed and unsuppressed for the 77 grain, 55 grain, and 62 grain projectiles that I shoot. These are all things you need to know. I know I can effectively engage a target out to 800 yards with that. You don't need the latest and greatest $5,000 optic that you're untrained with, because some guy with an Anderson Manufacturing and a Vortex, whatever the heck that was made 20 years ago that knows his stuff is going to clap your butt. And, well, you're going to sit there with your Knight's Armament SR-15 and crazy this, crazy that, and he's going to be saying, wow, look what I found. So go get training. Get quality gear. That doesn't mean you need to go spend, again, $5,000 for the latest and greatest. If you know what you're doing with what you got, you're going to be just fine. Also, don't sleep on physical fitness. Go for a run. make sure you can hold your rifle up for a little bit. And if you got too much stuff on your rifle, I know, coming from me, and you can't support it, then maybe take some stuff off your rifle. All right, I'll leave it off there, guys.